Okay, so back in 1997, I think it was April 1st, the very first episode of Pokemon, the anime, aired in Japan, and it came out first before anywhere else. And by the end of the episode, there's always been one thing that threw a lot of people off, is why was Ho-Oh, the legendary bird from Gen 2, in the very first episode of Pokemon when we don't really know what was going on at first? And this was right around the same time when Pokemon was still kind of finding its roots and changing. Now, granted, the anime is different, but it's also, this was right around the time when the games would kind of be different compared to what ideas they originally had, and they were implying it in the anime and over time. So, like, for example, you might remember that Stone Pillar as well, where it had the 4 legendaries on there, and one of them on there was Arcanine. But Arcanine's not really considered a legendary Pokemon anymore. Although in the Pokedex it is, but it's not really, like, the stats-wise and all that. Why was the game implying that there were certain things at one point, but in the final versions they ended up being different? And the problem was because things were changing and they were still trying to find the balance between what they wanted to. And one of the interesting ideas is, why did the game designers actually put Ho-Oh in the game, or in the anime, before the actual games came out? Well, what's really interesting is before the anime actually aired in Japan in 1997, somewhere in 1996, I believe, is when there was a Koro Koro comic that was Japanese only that actually specifically stated that Ho-Oh was the very first Pokemon that was being introduced, before even Togepi, before all the other ones. And it was going to be, they were symbolizing that that Gen 2 was coming out. However, though, the full story that a lot of people don't understand, the foreshadowing aspect, is that this is when they finally finished the coding for the 1997 Space World demo. So Gen 2 and Gen 1, the version they were developing at the time, was going to be completely different than the version that we finally got, because it would still take 2 more years that they would finally release these games, and most of it had to do with compression algorithms, thanks to Satoru Iwata when he was still alive, that's why the games were different than the versions we got. So if you actually go play, I think the ROM hack is called, not just 1997 Space World Demo, but it's, they went back and redesigned it. It was back, I'm trying to think what it was called. I always fucking hate it when I forget this shit. It was something to do, it was like a Space World something, like Crystal. It was a Pokemon Crystal ROM hack, I believe. And it basically had all the original sprites and everything, and you could see like just how different that game was at the time before they went back and changed and moved things around. The scaling was a tad bit different, the locations were a tad bit different, but everything was just it just looked completely different compared to what we got. And people do not realize how much history goes into this, even all these lost episodes slowly hinting at something else. But that's the real reason why Ho-Oh was actually cut. It wasn't because Ho-Oh was supposed to be part of Gen 1. I still think that a lot of it had to do with Gen 2 just coming out, and they just had these ideas for years. So that's why.